then let's go ahead and get Sean in here so he can start to tell us all about Sunite's journey into electrification.
All right, then. Cool. So,
and please, if you haven't done so already, please mute your during the presentation. I see a couple of people haven't muted yet.
Cool. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me here. So I'm going to give a quick little background. You might note that New York just succeeded in passing a law. California is working towards policies, but I'll get to that in a moment. But California just passed a law, and there's plenty of exceptions and such, but basically, yeah, they ban gas in all new construction. Not all, almost all, little workarounds. But the problem is that they're just catching up. Notice that New York is only 7% all electric construction currently. This is EIA 2020 data. So this is our most current snapshot that we have. California is just behind it at 8%, and New York and California, along with Illinois, which is 11% all electric. These are three of the largest gas consuming states in the United States, California being number one. So this is a result of policy. You can see that Arizona to the right side of the border here, 40% all electric, very similar climate to ours. But California, because we had our own Clean Air Act, our own energy laws, Title 24, et cetera, we've been able to chart a course that was independent. Oops, looks like my camera froze there. Sorry about that. And that was, we're a petro state, as you know, like Los Angeles is a gigantic oil field currently. They just this year banned any new oil fields, but it's the nation's largest oil field that's in a city. And so for quite a while, the fossil fuel industry has had most of our Congress people in our state on their speed dial. And let me just make sure that my audio is set right. Good. Okay. So the upshot of it is, looks like maybe someone needs to mute. I'm not sure who that is, but I just hear a little murmuring in the background. Anyway, so it doesn't have to be this way. That's my point. So New York has passed their law, California can pass theirs. We're starting from the bottom. We have to get our way up to the top. Just because we have supportive politics doesn't mean we actually have the solutions unless we pass our own laws. Just noticing in the chat. Oh, good. Okay, yeah, welcome, Steve Miller. So what California has instead of a law is we have policies that our governor is encouraging and has made emergency declarations. This is real work California activists have done in getting the governor to declare an emergency, getting the Air Resources Board and the Air Quality Management Boards, which are two different organizations that kind of interlock. So on the left-hand side, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is declared starting in 2027. That's heat pump water heaters will be required. No more gas sales of water. No more sales of gas water heaters, new construction or retrofits. 2029, I believe we get on to HVAC heat pumps. CARB is announcing bans that start in 2030, although they have other ones that are more accelerated for some diesel engines and such, and ports and things. And can we do it? Because pretty much every house in California has a 100 amp service. That it's an amount of power that's delivered in a moment. 100 amps is the maximum that would be able to come through a wire without it overheating and melting. So this is a really fun study of tens of thousands, or actually hundreds of thousands, literally, of homes in Sacramento. And in the blue line, you can see this is the peak power demand of a gas electric hybrid home. And so the average peak is around like 24, 25 amps, and all electric. And these are homes that have inefficient electric resistance heating for water heating and space heating, not even like modern heat pumps necessarily. But that's closer to like 33 is the peak. And you can see pretty much everyone is done using electricity by the time you get to 80 amps. But there is still perhaps 1% of households that can go. There's always, people can get crazy. There's, there might be a single household in the whole city that's using 300 amps because of, I don't know, their welding or whatever. So my point here is that pretty much everyone on this call has at least 100 amps, and you're not even using it. And you can electrify, because you see the all electric homes, they too are fitting on 100 amps. We have enough power already. We don't have to upsize our services and wires and et cetera. And these peaks, by the way, don't happen necessarily at the same time, because we now get with space heating, you get a winter peak. But when you go to a cold climate heat pump, like a good heat pump, you also get a lesser summer peak because they're way more efficient as air conditioners. They're not like SEER 12, they're SEER 19, SEER 20, SEER 42 even. So the peaks can shrink in the summertime when we have real grid stress as we electrify. Now, we're going to go to Sunite's house. Here we are, the Forthwell residence. It's a 5-bedroom house and an office, has 3 bathrooms, about 2,800 square feet, built back in 1994. So it has insulated walls and insulated attic, and the windows are okay. And, you know, it's kind of just a classic house in Southern California. So house doesn't get very hot, but it does get cold in the wintertime. It's true, actually, more energy is used in the wintertime in California for space heating than energy is used in the summer for air conditioning. It's just our summertime peaks. We get big peaks, but just generally, people struggle with it being cold in California. It's like one of these things people don't talk about much, but it gets cold in the wintertime. We got a 4 kilowatt solar array up there. That's great because that's about the right amount. You could almost double that amount of solar and still fit on a 200 amp service, which is what we have here. And you could even do more with a variety of technical strategies we could talk about, but just noting here that you have plenty of panel for plenty of service to your house, the 200 amp service for even a larger solar array. And this is what a 200 amp panel looks like. This is hers, theirs. And Tom, we're gonna hand it over, the mic over to him towards the end in a few slides. Tom did a terrific analysis of how you would add more electric devices, because note that this box has a lot of black ink next to it. Most of these circuit breakers are in use. There's plenty of space on the service, but this panel potentially could need replaced. This metal box with the metal connections, if you're not thoughtful about how you might put in smaller circuit breakers, just a little bit of work here so you don't have to put in a new box. It's just an expense that you don't need if you can avoid it. Okay, already mentioned I got the solar array up there, and then there's an EV charger, level 2 EV charger. Level 2 was it 30 amps? Do we know? 20?
I think Sunite's is a 50 amp circuit with 40 amp flow.
So level 2 is usually 20 to 40, right? Level 2, so you're right up at the top. Good for you, fast charger. But here is your gas range. You have an electric oven with this gas range. It's 30 inches wide. So what would you do to get rid of this? You have plenty of power in the house, so you'd still need to wire to it, like a new 240 volt wire. And here's an example. It's one of my favorites. Samsung has, they do these little blue LED lights that light up to look like flames. So if you're trying to transition from like, what is the amount? I used to use a flame to tell me how much heat I was adding. It's just like that, and it really looks like little blue flames on it. So as just like an emotional transition, if you're a little reluctant to change your life, this is a really easy one. Let's see here. Oh, the price, you see that, $1,700, 1700. Then GE, they've got one for about $2,000. I don't like it as much, but whatever. This is, it doesn't have the cute little blue lights. Has 4 burners on it. This one has only 2 that are burners, and then it has this long grill on the side where you can just sort of put things down anywhere on it. So it's, I think, a higher quality. Samsung was one of the early entries to the US market of induction stoves. I'm familiar with them going back 8 or 9 years now. So there's the GE. This is Bosch. So if you want to get a little fancier, this is a German brand. And this is very similar to the one that I showed, this first one, right? These have circles and blue, but note the layout, small one, big one, and like a griddle kind of, where you can put things down anywhere. It's the same thing here. For your 30-inch, when it's a little compact, this is how it gets laid out. But I want to show you that, like, this is a different way. It's kind of like the other two, but it's flipped. So instead of it being a small one on the bottom, the small one's in the back, kind of, and then you have these 2 burners off to the side. So in a way, they're kind of all the same with slight variations. This is how 30-inch stovetop ranges more or less get done, is the point. Then you have a gas dryer, but you have an electric resistance 240 volt plug, perfect for an electric resistance dryer right there. So you could do that. You could just get any dryer, anyone that you want. But if you wanted to go with a lower power option, just wanted to show you these things. So if this is, all three of these can plug into any outlet in your house, a 120 volt outlet. No, there's a 120 volt outlet there now for the washing machine. So if you, there's probably two outlets there, one for the washing machine, and you could plug this in as a dryer. Now these dryers from left to right, on the left-hand side, this is a 120 volt heat pump dryer. So this would use maybe 1/2 to 1/3 as much electricity over time in order to get your laundry equally dry as an electric resistance dryer, but it'd take 2 or 3 times as long to do it. But you could plug it in also anywhere in that 30 volt, 30 amp outlet that you had, the 240 30 amp outlet. You could just cap it over or use that wire to go over to where your stove is going to be for your ranges, because you need that amount of power for your range. So I'm just saying it's available if you don't use it. In the middle, this is an electric resistance dryer, but it's once again 120 volts, so it's going to dry for at least twice as long, but you don't have to rewire for such things. And then on the right-hand side, also 120 volt, this is a condensing washer and dryer. This is what I have in my house. I like them very much. But it's true, sometimes the laundry is left a little damp at the end, and they have condensate. So you have to deal with water as opposed to having a hole in the wall where you blow all the vapor out. So that's true for the heat pump dryer. They're condensate based and condensing washer dryers. So the left and the right are both ventless, 120 volt, and the one in the middle is vented electric resistance. So these are all options. And just trying to keep track if there's any questions in the chat here that I should address.
Not really yet.
I have a question, Sean.
Yeah.
So when you said it's electric resistant, I mean, heat pump I thought was not electric resistant.
True, it's not. So a heat pump, if you can get 240 volts heat pump dryers and 240 volt electric resistance dryers. So that's not the important difference. But you're right, when a heat pump is working, it is chilling the water vapor. And as it takes the heat out of the water vapor and condenses the moisture out, it uses that heat and turns it around and heats up the air that's in the drum. So it keeps on recycling heat as opposed to just using it once, like electric resistance essentially uses it once. So that, yeah, it's an important difference. You use 1/2 to 1/3 as much energy on a heat pump dryer as you would on electric resistance overall.
But if it takes twice as long to dry, wouldn't that match the amount of energy the gas will use?
Oh.
Or no?
No, in this way, I'm doing the math and saying, even including the fact that it's longer amounts of time, it's still using so much less energy over that time that at the end of the load, it's used half as much electricity total. Like instead of 2 kilowatt hours, it used 1 kilowatt hour total of electricity.
Mm.
The 120 volt part of it is that it uses less power in the moment, less push. The voltage is the amount of electricity being pushed. And so you don't have to push things and you don't have to use as much electricity in the moment with 120 volt. And then, anyway, the most important thing is you can just plug it into any outlet. That's why I like to push them forward. It's easy to retrofit. So if you were trying to reduce your energy consumption, you have a solar array, you would go with a heat pump, most likely heat pump dryer.
Okay.
But you don't have to. Yeah. Then you have a gas furnace and you have an electric, well, all air conditioners are electric. And we're going to talk about putting in a reversible air conditioner so that it does heating also. And it would look like this. On the outside of your house, you'd have this sort of suitcase box, something you could stick on an airplane underneath, not a carry-on, but a nice big suitcase. And what a heat pump is, if anyone's interested, is inside of this, there's a big fan. The fan is what's collecting the heat. And then there's a pump. And the pump is pumping refrigerant, which is basically a vapor of gas, like gasoline vapor, pretty close to that. It was originally ether, but it's all fossil fuels that evaporate. They choose different combinations of them, but what's in there is gasoline of a type. And you know how gasoline, evaporates? You can see it evaporating when you have gasoline in front of you. They use that process of these gases evaporating, like boiling essentially, and turning into vapor so easily that when it boils like that, it sucks heat into it. And so they're using this process of gases that boil at like -50 Fahrenheit, -30, -50, -110 Fahrenheit is when they boil, and so they turn into vapor. And in that process, it's always cold enough in there for the boiling to suck heat in. It sucks heat in by boiling liquid. Anyway, so there's a fan and a pump. It's called a heat pump. And what the pump is pumping around is a vapor / liquid. They just keep on like evaporating it and boiling it in a little closed loop cycle. So that refrigerant, which is the shorthand for it, the refrigerant, that gas, it runs in a little copper tube to this big box here, where there's another fan, and it releases heat through these little coils, and a fan blows over it, and that's what's heating the air or cooling the air. And then there's this mini split over on the side, because I think that you wanted to have one room not be a part of all the rest of the house zoning, but just be able to control that one room's heating and cooling, right, Sinead? Can you talk a little bit about that? What is that one room for?
Which room are you saying?
Oh, the ductless mini split on the far right
The
side.
master bedroom, yeah. So the issue that we have is the furnace is in the garage, which is the furthest area away from the master bedroom. So like we lived in this house for 28 years. We never got cooling or heating getting to the master bedroom, even though we have like a 5-ton system. So, I mean, we were told that just maybe that we had duct leakage, or it was just too far for the duct to, for, I guess, the unit to force air all the way to the bedroom. Yeah, so we're thinking about probably putting a ductless in that room, and still probably putting the air handler in the garage. I think that's maybe the possibility I think we talked about with Tom.
I think this is an opportunity to sing the praises of heat pumps, because your gas system can't do this. But we can put this reversible air conditioner outside and run one dedicated little copper pipe all the way over your bedroom. So you can make that its own zone with remote control, and you can heat it or cool it, for that matter, in the summertime and make it perfect. Can't do that with gas. And we could run a pipe of gas, I guess, all the way to your bedroom, and then burn it in your bedroom, like in a wall furnace, old school style. So it's true, but this little air condition, and it has a nice little remote control, and it's super quiet and safe. Running more gas is more dangerous. So this is the pitch. You're being proposed a Mitsubishi, which has this outside compressor, this heat pump here, and then it's got this 24,000 BTU air handler, also called a fan coil. These are all the same thing. And then you have a little 12,000 BTU ductless mini split little fan coil here on the wall, and you'd be set. And all this stuff costs about $6,000. And then it needs to be installed. So you should expect that it's going to be triple the price. That's generally how businesses work. Often materials are 40% and labor is 60%, but that is close enough to calling it triple the price that you might as well just do that for simple math. So I would take a stab at this being in the range of $15,000 to $18,000 to install. And you're going to try to get 3 bids so you can get it closer to 15 grand or 14 grand. This will be the most expensive part of electrifying your house. And you want to resist having them put in new ductwork, because ductwork will double the cost. And they know that. And so they'll always encourage to put in brand new ductwork instead of fixing what's there. And that's what you want to do, is don't throw it in the garbage, just fix it up. You don't have to do anything crazy. Your water heater. Here's your water heater, a 50-gallon water heater. And so we're being proposed to put in a 60 to 65-gallon water heater, just a little bit bigger. And there's 2 kinds of heat pump water heaters that are this there's a range of amount of power that heat pump water heaters take. Some of them take 30 amps. 30 amps equates to 4,500 watts. So that's like 2.5 hair dryers on full blast, 30 amps. You can get these 15 amp models. Stiebel Eltron and Rheem both make 15 amp, 2,250 watts. Those are the same thing. Water heaters. And then you can get water heaters that are like 1,400 watts and 900 to 500 watts. But this is the happy medium where you both have a really good heat pump that's mostly just doing heat pump work, but you also have an electric resistance backup element in case it gets really cold where this is located. Tom, where is this found? Why were you recommending the 15 amp instead of like the 500 to 900 watt one?
Oh, just because she had such a big panel. They,
Oh,
you know,
like,
it's just a luxury of extra capacity. But you know, to be kinder to the neighbors, could go with the 120 volt. And it also her, you'll see when I get to the usage slide, her water use is not very high. So 120 volt in her garage. Sinead also mentioned her garage door faces north, and so it doesn't get heated by the sun like her neighbors on the other side of the street have very, very hot garages. She has a cold one. And the 120 volt water heaters, they have a dilemma where they cut out at about 37 degrees Fahrenheit. If the garage got that cold, it stops to avoid getting frosted.
yeah. And I have, you know, your water heater can store your water piping hot for about 2 days, up to 3 days. So if it turns off for a couple hours at night, and they only run for 1 hour total in a 24-hour period, up to 4 hours, so it might not even be running at night at all. So you could put in a 120 volt tank in your garage, and this, or you could put this in too. This one will require a new 240 volt line as opposed to just plugging it in anywhere. And that's about $500. So that's a choice you have. And I'll note that the Stiebel Eltron is usually about $1,000 more expensive than Rheem. Stiebel Eltron is like German manufacturing, and they're kind of snooty about being super high quality in their manufacturing, and that's an American made product made over in Vermont. Rheem is made over in Atlanta, near Atlanta, Georgia. And they're just like everywhere production. So, some people would argue that you pay for what you get. So all I'm saying is that these are two different prices, but I use Rheems in all of our projects, and they're great.
Sean, could you talk about the 120 as opposed to the 220 water heater, like cost wise? Because I thought the 120 was going to be cheaper, but it's not.
It's not because, well, if you include the cost of running a 240 volt circuit, then, and that could be $500. And if it triggered some other wiring, it could be more than $500. So if you include that cost, buying the heat pump water heater, what the 120 volt ones, they have a thermal mixing valve so that you can store the water at 140 Fahrenheit and have it come out at 120 Fahrenheit. And that extra thermal mixing valve that they add so that you don't need electric resistance, it has a cost. So electric resistance is cheap. It's just a hot wire. It's just like a rod of metal that gets hot. That's all. So it's a cheap thing. The thermal mixing valves are a little bit more expensive. But if you can't or don't want to run a 240 volt line, like in apartments and condos, it can be hard to run wires because you could be disturbing other people's walls and such. So sometimes it's cheaper to put in a 120 volt tank, even though it might be $200 more expensive to buy. Maybe it's $2,400, not $2,200 for the exact same size and manufacture and things like that. But maybe it's less expensive because you can install it anywhere. Anyway, that's why it was invented. It was invented for some of the more difficult situations to install where you couldn't run a 240 volt line, which is, I'm not saying it's easier because you have to run a 240 volt line, but it is a little bit cheaper tank to buy that tank as opposed to the ones with the internal thermal mixing valves. That's what's going on.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, now Tom, the click to my clack. Tom, could you please explain this fantastic explanation of like how the billing works here? When she electrifies, what will we find out?
Sure. Thanks, Sean. So this is just a little part of the spreadsheet I was using to analyze Sonite's home usage. And so I took a look at our gas usage for the different months of the year. And by looking at how low it got in the summer when it was just doing cooking and drying off to the left in columns E and F, thanks. We could tell that, she wasn't using very much gas for that. And so it's about 18 therms for each is what I was assuming. And then there also would be hot water use. And so that on an annual basis, that's about 67 therms. And then we could tell that the winter usage would get a lot higher. And so the rest of it was used for the furnace. And that was kind of split. There was an energy audit done that found 20% of the furnace use probably went to duct leakage. So that's the far right 28 therms. And the other 111 therms made it into the house, keeping her warm. So that was kind of just how we look at it to allocate all the gas use and figure out where it is. And then that next row below it is just multiplying by the efficiency of each one of the devices. How efficient is each one at converting gas into heat? And you can see on the far left, cooking, it's really not very efficient. Most of the heat from a gas burner ends up kind of in your face or in the vent hood, trying to get out of your house if you're lucky enough to have a vent hood. And but for other things, they can be pretty efficient. Up to some of the best furnaces up to 90% efficient. And so by multiplying by the efficiency, we get the actual therms of heat in the next row below, and that's per year. And so then we know how much heat does it take to satisfy all those end uses, we call them, those 5 different end uses. And then now I put in the assumption for how efficient are the different electric devices we'll be using. And so like the induction cooking on the left is about 90% efficient. And then the dryer, heat pump dryer is about 200% efficient. You put 1 unit of electricity into it and it gets out twice as much water as a unit of heat of gas would have, because it's doing heat pumping. And then for the hot water, it's about 300% efficient and almost 300% for the heat pump. And so those are those numbers Sean's highlighting there. And so then I just convert over from the therms, which are 100,000 BTUs, over into kilowatt hours, which are only 3,400 BTUs each. And that tells you the number of kilowatt hours for each of those end uses. So doing all of this electrification, giving her the same service that she's getting now would be about 1,900 kilowatt hours per year. And then I just put in a couple of hypothetical costs there. Electricity at 30 cents a kilowatt hour and gas at $3. And that gives the comparative bills to operate each one of the devices. And then that electric savings row is if it's a positive number, it's savings, and the negative, like Sean's shown in parens there, that's $17 more costly per year to cook. Who can afford $17 a year? And so anyway, yeah, and then there's lots of savings on the hot water and the furnace. And total, the savings in this hypothetical is about $100 a year. So it's, if all you're using is grid power, it's hard to get rich or get poor electrifying your home. It's not that much difference in operating costs.
And she has a solar array.
Right.
So with 4 kilowatts going in, her electricity is potentially lower than 30 cents in its cost. And I'll just note that each of these numbers could be wiggled. The efficiencies of each of these might be 10% different with a different product or different assumptions. But this take home of that, we've studied this over and over and over and over and over. In California, it's more or less break even when you electrify, unless you put solar on the roof. And then you can get such cheap electricity that that's a whole new opportunity to lower bills. And to Tom's point, you're not going to get rich, but you can also get ahead a little bit,
Yep. And then the rest of the sheet is just looking at using the gas use data to size the heat pump for space heating. And sometimes we've got actual daily gas usage. In tonight's case, I had monthly usage. So I picked the highest month I could see out of the prior 18 months. And then figured out what is that average per day. It was about 151,000 BTUs. And that's that kind of top row up above there, 151,000. And then I just assumed that the peak day of the month would be 3 times the average because we get these cold snaps. So that'd be 450,000 BTUs that we need to deliver from the heat pump. And assuming that we just wanted it to run, 16 hours at its rated level, because heat pumps, they like to run nice long hours and just keep going at a moderate pace. And so that told me, how many BTUs per hour were needed, and it's 28,000 in that row right below, and dividing by 12,000 BTUs in a ton, it came up to just under 2.5 tons in that bottom row. So
And
that was
here. Note that this is what that math that he's doing is showing us that at the peakiest of the peak, at the worst moment of the year, 28,000 BTUs is needed. And that's how we got to the sizing of 30,000, 30 kBTUs, 30,000 BTUs per hour. Those two things match. You size your pump for the worst possible moments. And that's what Tom succeeded in doing there.
Yep. And so, and that would just have it running at its regular rated power for 16 hours. They can run even higher than their rated power, so it could finish the job in 12 hours, but there's still lots of slack in that peak day anyway. So that gives me confidence to be recommending a 2.5 ton heat pump. And so that's the 30,000 BTU rating on that.
Great.
Well done, Tom. Because
Thank you, Tom. And not to mention all the health, how much your health improves when you don't have gas going through your home.
now there's a question here. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to show what the question was. Pardon me here. So Jake Comer was asking about his heat pump. Whoopsie. Looks like, there we go. So this heat pump water heater is a 30 amp model. This is the most standard thing that you can get out there, 30 amp, 240 volts. So it has the biggest electric resistance element, and those are the ones that are not specialty products. Cheapest, that's the cheapest one you can get. And if you got a 15 amp one, like was recommended, it'd use less power, but it costs a little bit more. It'd probably be like not $1,700, but $1,900. And getting the same 50 gallon in 120 volts would probably cost $2,200. I just saw that from Pace recently. So $1,700 versus $2,200, that $500 spread is the $500 it might cost you to put a 240 volt line in. And I'll say it again, that was done on purpose. There's so many situations in which we couldn't run 240 volt 30 amp lines that, years of research starting in 2016, field research, literally millions of dollars spent to try to figure out how could we get a water heater that could plug in anywhere. And so that's the product that's come out with the thermal mixing valves and 140 Fahrenheit storage and yada, yada. So this is a good water heater. Go ahead and get it. And if you want to run it in heat pump mode, you can set it to heat pump mode so it doesn't use electric resistance, and that will save you some money. It'll reduce its energy consumption over a year by about 30%. What we saw on average, you could be different. You will be different. On average in a population, it's 30% less energy if you just run it in heat pump mode. But all that is to say, go ahead and get it. Like, get a heat pump. and if you don't mind putting an electrical line, this is a great one.
Right. And Sean, to plan ahead, because a lot of us never know when our appliances are going to break. So the sooner that you start getting prepared, then you're not going to find yourself in an emergency situation. In terms of the incentives, real quick before we go to Nathan, because we want to have our next guest, what kind of incentives or rebates or things like that might Sonite see for her home?
Well, there's the tax credit that is available to everybody through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's $3,200 a year that you can take, and it can't be more than 30% of the cost. So if you spend $10,000, you'll get $3,200. If you spend $20,000, you'll still get $3,200. But I believe that you can take it the next year as well, have it roll over so that you can get a total. I think you can, but I haven't done it. So what I know is that there's a tax credit for $3,200 for HVAC and domestic hot water. That's the main one. Then at your local level, your utility, depending on which utility you're working with, has some incentives for electrifying. Depends. Some of them have, like, some of the wealthy utilities in the Bay Area, like the small community choice ones, that a whole bunch of money come into them and they're really committed. They've been putting large incentives into heat pump water heaters, like SMUD, $3,000, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, $3,000, that kind of thing. But other places like LA DWP, $600, you know, even though they should, but they still haven't. So it's highly variable what the local utilities put in versus what I just mentioned, that the federal tax credit. But there's going to be some more money, hundreds of thousands.
And so I did put Sonite's zip code into the switches on's incentive finder. And what I noticed down there in Orange County was there was I think $1,000 incentive available for heat pump water heaters and $1,000 for heat pumps themselves. And then, Sean, as you were mentioning, the federal IRA tax credits are available right now too, and for the next 10 years. And they're $2,000 of tax credit each. Limited, or they're limited at 2,000. They're for 30% of the amount that's not covered by other incentives. But there's a $2,000 per year limit. So the tax credit, the way Manchin wrote it, it kind of makes you want to do the heat pump water heater in 1 year and the heat pump in another year, so that you can collect the most, since the sum of the two, if you did them in the same year, is only 2,000.
Thank you for clarifying. So while I'm going to work on getting some stove slides set up, but Nathan, you want to take over and show us the goodness?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, y'all. My name's Nathan. I use he him pronouns. I'm a senior digital campaigner with Stand.Earth. And I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about what we do and some of the really cool wins that have been happening from a policy point of view around building electrification. Everyone see the presentation okay?
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
All right. Yeah, so Safe Cities, basically what we are is we're an environmental nonprofit, and we work with local elected officials and with local residents, local people, in the community who want to phase out fossil fuels by doing policies like building electrification policies is one of our most popular policies that we use to do this, by basically saying, if you're going to put new construction in your city, that it's going to be all electric, so that the new stuff going in is already wired, is already all set up, and you don't have new gas hookups. And as folks have probably seen, I think Sean mentioned earlier on the call, the fossil fuel industry is kind of fighting this tooth and nail. But what's been really interesting with the reason we've been finding that we've been having success is that the fossil fuel industry can't be everywhere at once. And local governments have really taken the lead. As folks maybe know, Berkeley, starting in 2019, passed a building electrification policy that's dealing with all kind of legal troubles now, although that's a whole other separate topic that I could talk for a whole hour about. But a lot of other places have passed similar policies that are configured a bit differently. And what it's led to is that the fossil fuel industry is kind of freaked out because they can't be everywhere at once. They can't stop all these individual cities passing policies, whereas at the state or the federal level, it's a little bit easier for them to take action and stop movements that would phase out fossil fuels and in this case with electrifying buildings. So like I mentioned, One of the policy areas we focus on is building electrification and transport electrification. And we've had a bunch of victories. I think it was like last year we helped in some way, shape, or form more than 39 places across the United States and Canada. Locations pass building electrification policies. One of them was Richmond. I know there was the New York City one, although we weren't super involved in that one. But there was Bellingham in Washington State. And then what we're seeing, which is really interesting, is that as local places are doing this more and more, it's actually putting pressure on states to take action and put in pressure from the state level to actually implement building electrification policies and updating building codes at the state level. So after a bunch of cities in Washington did it, Washington State moved to make sure new buildings had heat pumps. And most recently, as this the same editorial that Sean shared, great minds think alike, was New York basically passed a really robust building electrification policy. And now there's talk about, why can't California do that? Why can't California do the same thing? So there's a lot of energy and movement in this area. As you can see, there's been safe policies all over the world, although this is not just building electrification policies. This also includes limiting fossil fuel infrastructure, such as gas stations or other pieces. But here we're talking about building electrification. But yeah, I think that the core of this is that the gas industry is freaking out. They are really scared by this strategy. They've called it an existential threat. They've called it death by 1,000 cuts. They're throwing lawsuits. They're throwing state preemption laws. They're doing everything they can to stop people, stop cities from basically electrifying the buildings in their community. And as important as the work that folks are doing on their own homes and their own individual spaces, what's even more important is getting that change done at a municipal level and basically making sure that new construction is all electric. So folks who move into those homes and live in those places don't then have to do what everyone is going through and having to, like what Tonight was having to do and having to re-upgrade and change all those pieces and do all those things. It's already will have been done for them when they move in. And so one of the things, so like I mentioned, we help folks do these types of policies. We have a repository of all the policies on our website that folks can kind of look up and look through and use as a template if they want to use them in their own community. And if you're interested in getting involved, if you're either in local government or you want to do something in your community, you can follow the link on the screen, which is safecities.earth/get involved, or you can scan the QR code, and feel free to message me, Nathan@stand.earth, or the general safe email. And what folks are doing in this space is really, really encouraging. And as important as the individual changes are, the system-wide changes are going to be even more important to kind of keep our climate safe. And then also from a health perspective, as many folks know, the gas stove's causing 1 in 8 cases of asthma. So there's a lot to be done.
Thank you, Nathan. That was really good. Thanks for letting us know and sharing that information with us. And by the way, Tristan, did you put the link? I think I saw to the petition.
I sure did.
In the chat. All right, so check that
So
out.
we have a little bit of time left for questions and just technical questions. One of them was around stoves. So I'll unblur my camera and make myself, as the kids say, transparent, right? So you can see here, I'm heating up my soup. Here, this is my 2-burner induction range. And then I have a toaster oven and a crock pot up here and a waffle iron. And this is my tiny house cooking situation. And I cook for 3 kids and myself. I would prefer to have a 3rd single burner range. And like, what is it? There's like, what is it?
Sean, we can't see your camera right now. Nathan, are you able to stop share?
I'm seeing it.
I'm sharing it.
Oh, okay, maybe I'm behind.
I'm sharing the induction cooktop options, I think.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see that. Okay.
So just so you can see, like there's a wok. I have this wok. It's a great wok. These are individual burner ones. New Wave is a good brand. And then they make commercial ones like Duck's Top. This is heavier and burlier, but they make ones that are $350 and $800. And, you know, you can get like a Volrath, VOL Wrath induction range. Let's see what we got. Yeah, like $800. And this they would have for what they call front of restaurant. If you're doing sort of decorative cooking where you make crepes and things in front of people. But they're just thicker and burlier and they last longer. The more money you spend, basically. Same way as like you used to buy stereo amps, you know, like the heavier it is, the better it is, kind of know that. So anyway, this is I think how you do the 120 volt solution is what the question was. And that's what I would argue is the easiest way is you get a 2 burner that you plug into one circuit and you get a 1 burner that you plug into another. Now do it here, except that my tiny house is so small. I just have just a 2 burner and I make do, but that's not because of lack of power. It's just countertop space. Let's see here.
But the ranges are everything from $60 to $700. And a lot of them they're all great, you know, they work.
Yeah. I mean, they're fast and quiet and cheap, and you know, if you cook on them hard, they only last for 2 or 3 years because that's what you're buying. You know, if you buy a $2,000 device, then you get that kind of 10-year warranty. But if you're just trying to get rid of the gas on your kitchen fast, this is so easy. And when I transitioned, I had my gas range next to my induction 2 burner, and pardon me. And so I did that for about 6 months, transitioning. And I very quickly stopped using the gas stove because I could turn on the electric one faster, because I could set the temperature on it faster, because I could do hot cocoa, which I love. And I could set it to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which I knew was my hot cocoa temperature. And so the controllability that you can't do with gas, you can't set it to a temperature. I just quickly stopped using the gas stove out of disinterest, and I'm a very ambitious, active cook, and I was like, oh, this gas stove isn't as good. It surprised me. I wasn't ready for that. It was just true. It wasn't as good. So going through the questions. Let's see.
And I just want to give a shout out to Steve Miller from New Jersey, saying that he's hosting Jersey-wide monthly building electrification webinar too. But we do ask Sean for any state, any community. Please, you know, let us know if we can be helpful in your town.
You know, there's a good question here from Amir. Amir wants to know, how can we get to backward counties and states like Florida that ban even the mention of climate, let alone electrification? Let me show you what I consider the answer to that question. Okay, so Florida is 77% all electric already. And I think that in parts of our country that are ideologically opposed to believing in climate change or solutions or whatever is the rationale, coincidentally, the building community of those states, 95% of people's homes are built by developers. So what you're dealing with when you look at this green is the development community. We build almost everyone's homes. And they're saying that all electric was cheaper for them to build. 41%, 37%, et cetera. That's essentially what they're saying, is that there's a significant chunk of the population in that state that believes in all electric construction. And I would lean in that way, like, don't talk about climate change, talk about it being cheaper and faster. And as a person who's had to deal with, I work in affordable housing, but nonetheless, affordable housing owners act like millionaires that they are. And so their political leanings are such that when I worked in an affordable housing developer, I would hear just like Rush Limbaugh on one side and Bill O'Reilly on the other, and just go down the list of Michael Savage. I learned all new names of radio hosts I didn't know were people when I worked at that affordable housing developer. And what I broke through on was like, all electric is going to be cheaper and faster to build. They agreed. And I said, and solar is going to lower the cost of electricity cost effectively within like 4 or 5 years. We're going to make money on this. And they're like, that's also true. And that was just those two fact statements have gotten me through all sorts of weird conversations for years now with these owners who are not at all politically aligned with me. And even just like last week, literally last week, the owner of that company that I'm mentioning sent me one of these hair on fire emails about how renewable energy was going to literally lead to the end of civilization. That's what the article's point was. And he sent me with an unhappy face. He's like, is this true? Unhappy face. Like, no. If this was true, you would not be profitable for our 28 zero net energy apartment complexes we built together. It's not true. Solar is cheap. Your financial bank accounts prove it. And that, at the end of the day, was the answer, because ideologically, I could not convince him. I sent 2 emails with like all the stuff, got nowhere. Sent him an email, just said, look, your projects prove it. And that was the end of the email chain. And he just stopped being upset. So that's how I deal with people who don't at all agree. I just say it's cheaper and faster and solar makes you more money. And let's all just, you can go to your church and I'll do what I do on Sundays. And so that's my recommendation, is just talk about it being cheaper and faster and more profitable.
You know, Sean, it's interesting. One of the economic piece is definitely a big part, but we found a lot of success is talking about the health piece of it as well. No one wants their kids to have asthma, right? You tell them that 1 in 8 cases of childhood asthma are caused by gas stoves. That's a freaky statistic.
Okay. Now, the pushback on that is that guy, the person just mentioning, the
Yeah.
Republican who thinks that way, he was proud about saying, oh, there's lead dirt in that place. Bring it over to my house. I'll let my kids play with it. Let's build a BMX roadmap out. We'll just get all the kids out of their bikes. And he literally did. And so some of these people are such magical thinkers that they don't understand how toxins work. They can't think through what a chemical compound does to someone's body. They only got to high school and they're done. And they didn't even like it, you know? They weren't the kids who paid attention. And they own companies because they're 4th generation wealthy and they didn't have to study in high school. That was the whole point. So it's like that crew of society, even the health stuff, they're like smoking cigarettes while they're talking to you, say, I don't care. But money and getting it done easier and faster, that, I swear to God, is the lowest common denominator I've found with people I think that are almost crazy.
Yeah, you definitely got to know your audience.
Yeah, I in my mother's house, her husband loves to cook and he's got this huge gas stove, and I just walked in and I'm like, oh my gosh, it smells like gas in here. You guys better turn on that fan. You know, there's all those toxins and benzene and all that stuff. You know,
It's like, oh, I didn't know that, right? Hopefully.
he's like, well, I usually do have the fan on, and he turns it on. But you know, just starting that conversation, how I can.
For the next, I think in a month when we do our next show, I'm gonna have a video to show you. I've had one of my staff with an infrared camera videoing the plumes of smoke that come off of stoves that we can't see. And you can see it surrounding like his mom's face as she turns on the stove, just like clouds of smoke around her that are invisible otherwise. Because I feel like, you know, like people have a hard time, if they don't see it, it's hard to believe it. So I want to do a breakthrough. But we are at time, and I am looking forward to my dinner over here that I just cooked up on my induction stove.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thanks,
for
everybody.
the
Thank you, Nathan.
Good night, and Nathan. Thank you all. And we'll see you next month, June 12th. And if you'd like to hear Henry Stern, please join us tomorrow night.
Can I bug you guys just real quick? Can we take a picture? Everybody turn on their cameras.
People want it?
I want to say thank you also to Sean and Tom. This is amazing. Am I getting a copy of that proposal?
Yes, I was just saying in the chat, we will be sharing that with you. Hey, Jake.
Okay, here we go. Picture 1, 2, smile. Okay.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you next time.
You guys have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy electrification.
Bye-bye.
And yes, tonight we will be sending you the PowerPoint, and we want you to come back so that we can follow your electrification journey. And if you have more questions, we're totally here for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're starting with the HVAC, heat pump, and then the stove.
Great,
Yeah.
perfect.
We'll
All right,
definitely-
thank you. Tom, thanks for
Take
your help
care.
tonight.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Hey, Randy. Yeah.
Thanks, all of you.